Hello everyone, this is Just a Dad. I'm going to do a quick video on how to buy a coffee pot off of Facebook Marketplace or eBay. eBay's a little trickier, at least with Facebook Marketplace. You get to kind of see it first. So I have bought quite a few coffee pots off of Facebook Marketplace. Now, I'm not really going to cover Keurigs. That's kind of their own separate world, and I really don't recommend buying Keurigs off of Facebook or used Keurigs. You got to be really careful if you want to get a Keurig. Now, coffee pots, on the other hand, they seem to last a little longer. With Keurigs, you've got a water pump that you got to worry about if it's good or bad. With a standard coffee maker, very simple. They seem to last forever. All the brands that I've bought, as far as a coffee maker, I've never really bought a bad coffee maker. Now, I did buy one where the display was out, but it still worked. Now, this one didn't. This one worked really well. This is one of the nicer ones I bought. Mr. Coffee seems to be the brand. They just seem to, their coffee makers seem to be built better. Now, they're still pretty cheap, but they're just like convenient, and they kind of are basic. You don't have a lot of fancy features with Mr. Coffee makers. Cuisinart, they seem to last a long time, but they're just a little more different. They look a little different. And then you've got your Hamilton Beaches. Now, the Hamilton Beaches, very, very basic, and they seem to be the ones that are made the cheapest. The same with the Walmart ones. I did buy a vintage coffee maker. And then there's some of these odd ones where this one does a single brew on the side. This was a Hamilton Beach. Yeah, this one was pretty good. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of what we got to look for. So things you're going to see right away is how was it used? How often was it used? And that's going to be a good indicator of how this coffee pot's going to work. I don't get too worried about the burners. These clean up really well. Even this one works really well, even though it doesn't look the best. But you want to look at kind of the coffee pot, see how often it's been used, and that sort of thing. You're going to get a lot. You're going to look up here where they do the actual brewing. You know, have they ever cleaned it? Have they not cleaned it? This one had quite a bit of use. And like I said, I've cleaned this one pretty good. Then this Krups, this one cleaned up really well. The person that was selling it was just super nice. You could sort of tell they were selling an honest product. It was already relatively pretty clean. I'm not too afraid of the brown coffee stains because I've got another video where I show you how to clean those brown coffee stains. Those clean up really well. A lot of people don't know how to clean up coffee stains from plastic. So it may look really bad, but that brown stuff cleans up really well with some stuff off of Amazon for $5. If you can, make sure the LED display works. Like I said, coffee makers are just so simple. You basically turn them on, and there's just a heating element inside here. And when you pour the water in, it heats the water up, and it percolates out into your coffee maker. So there's really no moving parts. So these typically do last. Now, a lot of these I bought, I wasn't able to plug them in. And I only got burned on a couple by not plugging them in. Like I said, they worked, but I had one where the display didn't work. Now, Bunn makes a very sophisticated coffee maker. They've been making them for a while, you can tell. They don't have a lot of models, but this one was a really, really nice model. And like I said, most people don't clean their coffee makers when they sell them. So don't be afraid. This one had a lot of brown stains from the coffee brew process. You can see there's still some. I cleaned this quite a bit. You know, I could have cleaned it a little bit more. You know, the filter basket's going to tell you a lot. If it has a carbon filter or not. So also be wary of the price. So for this Bunn, this is about a $100 coffee maker, and I paid $2 for it. I'm like, well, why is he selling for $2? Well, it was in really, really bad shape, and it actually leaks internally. So the coffee maker is actually broke. And so be careful if the price is really, really low. They're just wanting to get rid of it, I think. Typical price, 10, 20 bucks for Mr. Coffee. Cuisinarts seem to go a little higher. Bronze definitely a little bit, maybe 30 bucks. And when you get into these, when they have multiple things, like this is a hot water dispenser, they usually go around 30 bucks, maybe 40. Now the real steals are these vintage coffee makers. I picked this one up for 5 bucks and it works really well. But it's a 1970s coffee maker with no pause brewing, you know, but it works really well. Toastmaster, really, really, really cheap brand. So you might see some coffee makers like this, maybe just for 10 bucks. You know, that's all they're going to get out of them because they were so cheap to begin with. And same with the Walmart brand, Mainstays. You know, some of their coffee makers are 10 bucks. So then there's some real odd ones. I bought this Hamilton Beach. Didn't pay a whole lot for it. So keep in mind, if you do buy a coffee maker that is really, really dirty, I spent probably, a couple hours cleaning this. So, you know, if it's really, really dirty, you're going to have to spend a lot of time cleaning it. So if it's worth your time cleaning it up, maybe if you get a good deal, maybe not. But this one was extremely dirty, and the process of running the, vinegar through, that takes an hour or so. So a couple of these I got at Salvation Army. There's Goodwill stores sell them. And there's some thrift shops that tend to sell coffee makers. They don't get into the really expensive ones. A lot of times you'll see some Mr. Coffees there and stuff. But they can be pretty nice. And they usually only put the really good ones out. But like Salvation Army, they'll kind of put anything out that maybe doesn't look the best. So you got to really just watch what you're buying sometimes. So getting back to tell whether a coffee maker has been used. So that's going to be a main key. So these things do have a life. You know, they're only going to last for so long. But they do last a long time. But like this Bunn, I could just tell right away. Everything was pretty much worn out. You know, the filter basket just kind of wouldn't go in anymore. It was just worn out. Up here, there was a lot of white staining from calcium buildup. So I could tell, you can just kind of tell if the coffee maker's been used an extreme amount of time. They would have had to keep up with the descaling process for it to last a long time. But maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But I would tend to stay away from a coffee maker that shows a lot of signs of use. So one more thing with the Bunn coffee makers. Now, the heating element is kept on all the time. So like with a normal coffee maker, it only is working whenever you go to make a pot of coffee. The Bunns, though, they have a reservoir back here, and it's keeping the water hot all the time so that when you go to brew a pot of coffee, you're just putting in water and it's displacing that hot water, and that's why you get a 4-minute brew out of these. So I don't recommend buying a used Bunn, just because they seem to get a little more wear and tear. And people that have Bunns typically are your coffee drinkers that drink a lot of coffee, I think. I've just noticed on Facebook, when I look at the pictures, the Bunn coffee makers just seem very, very well used. And I wouldn't buy one because they would have had to keep up on the descaling process a lot, because that heating element is kept the water heating all the time. So it's going to build up calcium more than, say, a Mr. Coffee. So that heating element only works when you pour the water in and you're brewing that cup of coffee. That's why I seem to find these type of coffee makers in such a good shape. But the Bunns I've seen and bought, they're good coffee makers, don't get me wrong, but they just seem to get a little more use, and just because of that water being kept on all the time. So another thing to look out for is, do you want the programmable? So sometimes these ones that are programmable can be a little confusing about setting the time and everything. I found some of the simpler coffee makers work the best when they don't have the programmable part. They're just easier to turn on and off, and they've got certain features. But so keep in mind, if you don't want the programmable, I probably wouldn't get a programmable coffee maker. Now, some features to look out for is, some people have a tendency to leave so you'll get your cup of coffee, you'll go away and you'll leave your coffee maker on, you want the auto shut off feature. So that's a great feature to make sure so that the warming plate turns off typically after 2 hours. Because if that doesn't turn off, which some of the really cheap coffee makers don't turn off unless you actually physically turn the switch off, that coffee will evaporate and eventually burn in the bottom of your coffee pot. So that's a really good feature to look out for, is so that automatically shuts off. And then you've got typical filters. So this is a normal filter basket. They call that a basket style. And then you've got some that are cone. So I wasn't real familiar. See, this is a cone shaped filter. So these are just as available, the filters, you can buy them at Walmart just like you can the regular ones. But I did find that the cone shaped one might have brewed a little bit better cup of coffee. I don't know what it is about it, and I don't know why some people do. I don't know why coffee makers went to cone. But so I might be inclined to get a cone shaped coffee filter. They're usually a little taller because of that cone shape. So these specialty coffee makers, you know, this one worked really well, but unless you're going to, this is a single serve side where you're going to put coffee grounds in there and you're going to brew just a single cup of coffee. You know, these take up a lot more space and there's just a lot more controls with them. So unless you're really going to use something like that, I wouldn't recommend getting something like that. And some things to keep in mind is access. So this is a really tall coffee maker, and if you keep it under your cabinets, just keep in mind you got to pour where you're going to pour the water, how you're going to access the coffee maker. They do sell some that it's all front access, and Mr. Coffee is pretty standard. You're going to pour the water in the back, and it's pretty easy to access the filter basket. You know, the Cuisinart here, you just lift the lid, you're going to pour the water back here. You know, carbon filters, so some have them, some don't. And Mr. Coffee, if you want filtered coffee, then get a brand that has this type of filter. Because this is the easiest to change. You just, it goes down there in the reservoir, and before the water can go into the heating element, it has to pass through this carbon filter. Mr. Coffee water filters are not the best because they hang over the brew basket, and so they put their water filter on top of the brew basket, on top of the coffee grounds, so that when the hot water comes out, it passes over the filter before it goes to the coffee grounds. That's just real inconvenient because you're taking that on and off every time you put coffee grounds in. I don't know why Mr. Coffee made theirs that way, because everything else about their coffee makers is like really good. Like they know what they're doing, they've been doing it a while, and they've made it just very convenient. But if you want a water filtration system, you're probably gonna have to get a little nicer model. The Braun's got a really good water filtration system with a nice little lever that tells you what month you changed it, and these are real standard to get them off of Amazon. And also be careful, so some coffee makers look like coffee makers, but they won't have a warming plate. So I've bought a couple that it just brews the coffee and it sits there. Now one of the ways, it may have a thermos. So see how these are glass? If you've got like a thermos, they're expecting that steel thermos to keep the coffee warm, and they're not going to warm that up with a coffee warming plate. So just make sure you want, you know, you may want the other style, but be careful because sometimes they look the same, but you won't have a warming plate. So also do your research on that model. Now, you may be buying a coffee maker that they don't make anymore, but do your research on what that thing costs, what that coffee pot costs new. And you, on Facebook Marketplace, you really should be getting a deal, because like I said, most people, they just don't clean them. They just are done with them. And once in a while, you'll get somebody that just stopped making coffee. They tried it and didn't use it, so the coffee pot has hardly any use on it. But most people are just, they've kind of used it up, and it's just like it's never been cleaned. So you should be getting a pretty good deal on a Facebook Marketplace coffee maker. I do notice that they do sit on there for quite a while, so they don't move a lot on Facebook Marketplace. So like I said, you should be getting a pretty good deal on them. I would say less than half of what the original cost was, maybe a quarter of what the original cost was, because and especially if they don't make it anymore, they've probably used it for a while. And it still has some life in it, but you're getting somebody's used coffee maker. So I would feel pretty comfortable buying a coffee maker off of Facebook Marketplace. Like I said, I've only gotten one out of maybe 30 that were bad, and it worked. It's just the display wasn't. And I should have known because it was for sale really cheap. It was like $5. But it still worked. But with the porch pickup, you can't always plug it in and try it out. So I would not be terribly afraid of buying a coffee maker. Just kind of ask for some close-up pictures, mainly the filter basket area, and see if they've kind of kept up with the cleaning a little bit. Clean it like the burner. A lot of people don't clean their burners, but they do clean up rather well. And I've never had a burner go bad. So even though I've had some that look really bad, even this Braun. So this Braun one looks really bad, but it works. It works really good. It doesn't make a sound or anything, but it just works. So I hope this video helps you with picking out a coffee maker. Like I said, the Keurigs, I'm going to do another video on the Keurigs. You got to be very careful. I don't recommend buying these. I've been burned about 50% of the time now buying Keurigs off of Facebook Marketplace. Just because you can't plug them in, try them out. But even though they may seem like they're working, it's the amount of liquid you're getting from the pump that's the big key. So when those pumps start to fail, you don't get the proper amount of liquid, which means you're not getting the proper amount of pressure either. So again, this is Just a Dad. If you could, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.